Welcome to the CRS Elevation Certificate Training Series on how to fill out an elevation certificate correctly, specifically how to do it for CRS purposes. This is the first in a series of 9 videos that will cover how to fill out all sections of the elevation certificate. This video covers Section A of the 2023 form. The CRS EC training videos are primarily created for local officials who have to collect, review, and correct these forms so that they are correct for CRS purposes. FEMA has many forms related to construction in the Special Flood Hazard Area, or SFHA. To be sure we are clear, we will be covering the FEMA Elevation Certificate FF-206-FY-22-152. The form shown on the screen will be referred to as the 2023 form. Let's first understand some basics about the Elevation Certificate, or EC. The current form, which should be used by everyone at this time, is dated August 2023. This date can be found down in the bottom left-hand corner of each page of the form. You can also tell which form it is from the expiration date in the upper right-hand corner. The previous version's expiration date is November 30th, 2022. The current effective EC became effective July 7th, 2023. It replaced the 2019 form. However, on August 9th, 2023, FEMA extended the expiration of the previous version until November 1st, 2023. During this time, both the new form and the previous form could be used. However, after November 1st, 2023, only the new form is acceptable. There are some significant changes to this new form. This training video series will cover these changes and provide the rules for the entire form. For compliance purposes in the NFIP, a community is required to obtain the elevation of the lowest floor of a building and the base flood elevation. The information is not required to be collected through an EC for NFIP purposes. However, once you join CRS, it is. CRS communities must require ECs for all new construction and substantial damage or substantial improvement in the SFHA. You must also make sure the information on them is complete and correct. Failure to use ECs will result in removal from the program. ECs are primarily used for 3 main purposes. The first is for NFIP compliance, as a way to document whether a building was constructed compliantly or not. The second purpose is insurance. FEMA's current rating methodology has removed the requirement for ECs to obtain flood insurance. However, they are strongly encouraged when applying for an insurance policy and are still an integral part in making sure the building is properly rated. The final purpose for an EC are letters of map change, or LOMCs. The EC is an integral part of the letter of map change process to show whether the building is in or out of the special flood hazard area. Submittal of ECs filled out for letters of map change are not required for CRS communities. So for the purposes of this training, we will not address ECs for LOMCs. The first place you will find guidance on how to fill out an EC is in the EC instructions themselves. The instructions are a part of the EC. They can be found by clicking on the Form Instructions button at the top left corner of the form. Once you click on the button, you can view the 11 pages of instructions that come with the form. To return to the form, you just click on the Return to Form button. You can toggle back and forth between the form and the instructions this way. Now that we've talked about the correct version of the form, the use of the form, and its instructions, let's now go through the first section of the EC, Section A. We will explain what needs to be filled out and why, specifically for CRS purposes. An important point to remember is that there are many users that may view the document. This includes the permit official and surveyor, your regional FEMA insurance or compliance representative, your state NFIP coordinator, insurance agents and underwriters, the current and subsequent building owners, and your ISO reviewer for CRS purposes. So, it's critical that the information on an EC is accurate, complete, and adequately describes the building with the proper information and elevations required by the form. Let's start with A1, building owner's name. Building ownership may change over time, especially when they are initially built and transferred from a developer to the first homeowner. Due to this, the name associated with the building is not required. What is most important with identification of a building is its address, or, when lacking a proper address in some instances, the property description. Either A2 or A3 must be filled out so that the building can be located in the community properly. The address or property description is the key identifier for each form. Whether you use A2 or A3, the city, state, and zip code must be filled in. Also, the address should be at the top of each of the EC pages. If any of the addresses on a page differs, this will be considered an error. The addresses for each page must match up so we know it's information for the same building on all the pages. A4 must be filled out. The two terms that are key are residential and non-residential, as this is how the NFIP categorizes a lot of buildings for both compliance and insurance purposes. However, terms like addition, accessory, or agricultural, commercial, industrial, or mixed use helps as well. At a minimum, a term must be entered in this field that allows the reviewer to determine if the building is residential, non-residential, or accessory. With the way insurance is now determined, buildings are now geolocated. Therefore, A5, the latitude and longitude, is now a required field for CRS purposes. Without the latitude and longitude, the property cannot be correctly geolocated, and many of the variables used in the insurance rating process will be invalid. There are two ways to format the latitude and longitude. They can be in decimal degrees, in which 6 decimals are needed, or they can be in degrees, minutes, and seconds, in which the seconds must have at least 2 decimal places. The address or property description in A2 or A3 is required as a way to locate the building for compliance and permitting purposes. The latitude and longitude are now more integral for an EC for geolocation of flood insurance policies under FEMA's current rating methodology. Now let's move to A6. Here's another change with the current EC. Previously, photographs were only required for insurance agents. 2 photographs, and when possible 4, are now required with every EC. The pictures must be within 90 days of certification, must be in color, and must be of good quality so that they can be seen clearly. If 4 photos are included, they should be of each side of the structure. Examples of buildings where you cannot see all 4 sides are a townhouse, condo, or commercial structure that has shared walls, or a structure that has a fence, building, or other obstruction too close to it. In these cases, the surveyor is expected to show at least 2 sides of the building. The building diagram number is critical to an accurate insurance rating and for verifying compliance. The diagram number, in combination with elevation number in C2A and C2B, provides critical information on the foundation type and floor elevations. Pages 17 through 19 of the EC instructions show the 11 different building diagrams for EC purposes. Become very familiar with them so that you can verify the use of the correct diagram number in A7. Diagrams should be very specific. Certifiers must use 1A or 1B. If you enter just a 1, it's considered an error. Also, enter 2A or 2B, not just 2. And last in this section are fields A8 and A9. We'll talk about them together since they both ask for the same basic information. Since they are for different parts of the building, we'll talk about A8 first, and then we'll show how the same logic applies to A9. A8 and A9 have changed from the previous forms to make the required openings information easier to enter and to understand. Every field from A8A through A8F should be reviewed and filled out. If any field is irrelevant to the building, the certifier should enter NA to indicate the field was reviewed but is not applicable to the building. CRS will not consider it an error if the field is left blank when it's irrelevant to the building. However, please encourage all surveyors to mark it NA so that it's clear to everyone reviewing the form that it does not apply to the building. A8A asks for the square footage of the crawlspace or enclosure of a building. A crawlspace is used when you have a diagram 8 or 9 building, which is a building that elevates a floor above a rather shallow base flood elevation on a piece of property. An enclosure, as defined by the Flood Insurance Manual, is that portion of an elevated building below the lowest elevated floor that is either partially or fully enclosed by rigid walls. Some examples are a garage, storage, or utility room below the elevated floor of an elevated building. It can also be thought of as a garage, storage, or utility room attached and next to the elevated building with the enclosure lower than the elevated floor, or it can be the crawl space below the lowest elevated floor. So in essence, an enclosure is an enclosed area with an elevation that's lower than that of the elevated living floor. Enclosures versus attached garages is a rather confusing issue. Let's cover this issue now. An enclosure is that area that has an elevation lower than the elevated floor. That means for diagrams 6, 7, 8, and 9, any enclosed area under the living floor that is elevated is considered an enclosure. This is a diagram 7 building. In this picture, although the use of the area under the elevated floor is a garage, it is considered an enclosure because it is an elevated building. Likewise, in this diagram 6 building, the area below the elevated living floor is used for storage or access to the building, and it's an enclosure. An area is only considered an attached garage when it is used as a garage and it's attached to a non-elevated building. A diagram 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3, or 4. In this picture, you can see a garage attached to the side of the non-elevated diagram 1A building. Therefore, this is considered an attached garage. Now, here's where it gets a little trickier. If you have what appears to be a diagram 5 building, where the living space is elevated on posts, piers, or piles, but then a garage is attached to the side of the building like this picture, because the building is elevated, the garage area is considered an enclosure and it becomes a diagram 6 building. Along these same lines, diagram 8 and 9 buildings, those with crawl spaces, also work the same way. If there's a garage attached to the side of the living area and its floor is in elevation lower than the elevated floor for the house, because the building is considered elevated, those garage areas are considered enclosures and must be marked that way on the elevation certificate. You'll want to remember this when we get to section C and talk about elevations for attached garages in C2D. If it's an enclosure, an elevation in C2D for an attached garage should not be entered. It can't be called an enclosure in section A, but an attached garage in section C, and vice versa. Please refer to the section C video for complete guidance. So if you have a building that has a crawl space or enclosure, the square footage of that crawl space or enclosure must be placed in A8A. Let's look at an example. Let's say the size of the enclosure of our fake building is 800 square feet. So we put that number in A8A. Since the BFE was above our existing ground elevation, we elevated the living space floor above that BFE. Then we enclosed the area under the elevated floor. This enclosure extends down below the BFE. To reduce the risk of damage during flooding, to be compliant, and to receive a better insurance rate, openings need to be placed in the walls. FEMA's Technical Bulletin Number 1 encourages at least one permanent flood opening on 2 different sides of the building. A8B requires an answer to the question if one permanent opening exists on 2 different sides of the building. A box must be checked. Leaving this blank could result in an error. In our case, this building has 6 openings, and they are on at least 2 or more sides of the building, so yes will be marked. A8C then asks for the number of openings that are within 1 foot above the adjacent grade, either outside the enclosure or inside the enclosure. Notice it requires the certifier to indicate how many of the openings are non-engineered and how many are engineered openings. If openings exist for the buildings and they are within 1 foot of the adjacent grade, these fields need to be filled out. Again, in our case, we have 6 openings and 4 of them are non-engineered, while 2 of them are engineered, so we'll mark the fields accordingly. A8D and A8E then ask for the areas of those openings. A8D asks for the net open area of the non-engineered openings. And let's say our 6 openings are a typical 8 by 16 concrete block. So 128 square inches times 4 openings is 512 square inches. So we place that in A8D. The EC instructions for A8D and Technical Bulletin 1 explain how to calculate the area if there's a question as to how to do it. A8E then asks for the rated area of the engineered openings. You can find the rated area for an engineered opening from 2 sources: the individual engineered flood opening certification for the openings used, or from an evaluation report from the International Code Council Evaluation Service, or ICCES. The report must be attached to the EC for CRS purposes. Also, the certifier must place the model number and rated area in the Section D comments section when engineered openings are used. In our case, the 2 engineered openings are rated for 200 square feet each, so we would place 400 in the blank for A8E. A8F then asks the certifier to add the net open area in A8D and the rated area in A8E and place that here. In our case, you see the total would be 912 square feet. In many cases, you will only have non-engineered openings, so the total in A8F will be the same as the total in A8D. In other cases, you will only have engineered openings used, so the total in A8F will be the same as the total in A8E. No matter what type of openings are used, all fields need to be entered and the sum of the areas needs to be tallied. This is important not only for compliance purposes, but also for insurance purposes to make sure the opening sizes are adequate. Remember, the NFIP requires 1 square inch of opening for every square foot of enclosure, so this helps to validate that. Remember, either the International Codes Council Evaluation Service, or ICCES report, is required, or an individual certification from an engineer is required to be attached to the EC. Be sure to use the Section D comments to describe the model number of the engineered vent if it's not clear which model is used on the certification itself. If an individual certificate is used like the one seen here, it must capture 4 things. First, it must identify the building that the openings are installed in. Second, it must show the name, title, address, type of license, state issuing the license, signature, and seal of the certifier. Third, it must include a statement certifying that the openings will equalize hydrostatic pressure on exterior walls by allowing for the automatic entry and exit of floodwaters. And fourth, the range of flood characteristics tested or computed, such as the rates of rise and fall of floodwaters. Be sure you are requiring engineered opening certifications. When reviewing an individual certification like this, be sure to look closely at it to check these 4 things. Finally, attach it to the EC when submitting them for CRS review. Failure to have these certifications or missing information on the certifications are considered errors. Both insurance and compliance need to know the rated size of these openings and that they meet all the NFIP criteria. Let's stop at the end of A8. These 6 fields are required for several reasons. First, they tell you about the foundation of the building, which helps verify if you have the correct building diagram number. Next, they help determine if a building is compliant with the proper amount and size of openings. Finally, they provide information for the kind of insurance rating and mitigation discount the building is going to receive. Again, this is dependent on the number and total size of the openings. If there is no crawl space or enclosure for the building, then we'd prefer if NA was entered in all of the fields. If the fields are just left blank, we will accept this too, but an NA is encouraged since it confirms the certifier reviewed that they don't exist for the structure. If there is an enclosure but no openings, no should be marked for A8B and 0 should be the correct entry for A8C. Leaving them blank in this situation is an error. The fields in A9 work exactly the same way as the fields in A8, with all 6 being required to be filled unless any of them are not applicable for the building. Again, we'd prefer NA in all fields if no openings exist, but blanks are acceptable if that is truly the case for the building. And remember, A9 is for attached garages, those enclosed areas used for parking vehicles that are next to and attached to non-elevated buildings like this one. This slab-on-grade building has an attached garage. Remember, the garage area for this building is an enclosure since it's below the elevated floor of an elevated building. Now that we've covered how to fill out the fields in Section A, let's discuss common errors in this section. There are 3 common errors in Section A that will present themselves again with a new form. The first one is field A4 being left blank. Please be sure to check this to make sure something is there to help the reviewer know whether it's a residential or non-residential building. Next, the most common error we see on all ECs is entering the wrong diagram. This is field A7. Compliance is mostly tied to the lowest floor, and the diagram numbers indicate where those lowest floors are. Choosing the wrong diagram number can lead to incorrect ratings and a building that may look non-compliant. The foundation type, not necessarily what the building looks like, is the key to getting the correct building diagram. And lastly, a very common error on all ECs occur with A8 and A9, knowing what is an enclosure and what is an attached garage. Like we mentioned earlier, a garage area that is attached to the side of a building is considered an attached garage. The size of it, the number and size of openings, should all be placed in A9. When you have an elevated building, the garage area that is fully underneath an elevated floor may be on the side of the building, but extends down below the elevated floor. This is considered an enclosure and should be marked in A8. We are anticipating the 2023 form to present potential new errors for everyone within 2 new required fields, A5 for latitude and longitude, and A6 for the inclusion of pictures. Please keep an eye on these to make sure that the latitude and longitude are entered in the correct format, and to make sure enough pictures are present, they are clear, and adequately show all sides of the building when possible. Since there could be many errors on an EC, we will also cover how to correct them once you identify them. That will be covered in a separate video called How to Correct an Elevation Certificate. That concludes training on how to fill out Section A of the Elevation Certificate correctly. Please go to our next training video in this series, How to Fill Out an Elevation Certificate Correctly, Section B.